All right. Welcome back to Life After AI. Um, for this episode, we're going to discuss kind of the latest innovations within AI. We've got a lot of exciting stuff coming out at the moment, including GPT-4. Google put out um, some new stuff in Bing as well. So, Alec, you want to get us going on ChatGPT-4?
Sure. Yeah, first I just want to say, I think this is probably the most exciting week we've had in AI, at least that I can remember. Um, this is, it seems like literally every single day there's been a major company putting out some sort of major advancement or integration into their products. So it's really cool to see just the rate at which all this stuff is happening. Um, but yeah, first I'd say let's start out with the release of GPT-4. That's probably the biggest and most important news here. Um, I remember on the last episode, we talked about the potential, the rumor that was kind of going around that GPT-4 was going to be put out this week. And I didn't know how reliable that was because they never made an announcement or anything like that. There was no hype around this really. It was just some obscure article that mentioned it may or may not be released this week, and sure enough, it was. But I think that's really cool the way that OpenAI is operating. They aren't like a hype company, they just kind of build behind the scenes, and then when it's ready, they just put it out there. They aren't saying, "Oh, GPT-4 will be ready in 2 weeks," and then they do this crazy marketing campaign for 2 weeks. They're just like, "Okay, it's done. Let's put it out there and go."
Yeah.
Um,
It also seems straight to business in the sense that they were just like, Um, they trusted that it was good, but at the same time, they're like, we know there's things wrong with it. Get us your feedback. Let's make it even better.
yeah, I love that, and I thought it was really interesting too that from what they said, GPT-4 has been done for months. Like they did the training 6 months ago or something, and then they've just been using it and testing it internally for several months since then. So that kind of makes you wonder where are they at on GPT-5? I would imagine they've already probably started the training process for that. While in addition, they're probably working to improve GPT-4 at the same time. So yeah, it's just crazy that the rate at which this company moves. Um,
hmm And
but yeah,
then
my
to
go ahead.
just quickly too, not only is it impressive how fast they provide these updates, but like the difference between the new version and the last version. I'm not familiar with 3.5 to 3. My understanding is that that was a big gap, but
Mhm.
this gap especially seems to be significant between 4 and 3.5.
Yeah, for sure. They aren't just putting out these small iterative updates over time. Even in just half a version going from 3.5 to 4 is substantial improvement, and they continue to do that every single time. Um,
I
so yeah,
think I, I
my
think I made the I think I made the joke earlier this week. They're not Apple updates. You can tell of what
yes,
the changes are.
literally the exact opposite. Yeah,
Mhm.
which I love. Apple, the way Apple does stuff is just kind of bothersome at this point. So biggest takeaways that I had from GPT-4 release, one is multimodal, so that now supports text and images. So it can actually interpret image inputs, and you can ask it questions about certain images, and it can analyze them, completely understand them. From what I understand, that's not available to the public yet. You can use GPT-4 if you have if you're paying for Chat GPT Plus, or if you have access to their API, like you're one of the approved businesses that do. But no one has access to the image inputs yet, which I thought was kind of interesting. I kind of feel like if they were gonna make this release, why not include that in it as well, instead of just being like, oh, we have this, but can't use it yet. But I'm sure knowing them, it'll only be a matter of a week or two before people can actually start using that and playing around with it. So that's something to look forward to. Another big thing is the context windows are now much larger. So ChatGPT uses GPT 3.5, and the context window for that is around 8,000 tokens, I think. the max context window for GPT-4 is 32,000 tokens, and that equates to like 50 pages of text. So that's like a massive amount of data that you can include in a prompt, and it can ingest all of that at a single time. Or you could just give it like a very basic prompt and say, write 50 pages about this, and like it'll do it. So that's wild.
You want to talk about that's the thing that just happened to strike me the most. You want to talk about the example that they used in the demo with the tax document?
Oh, right. Yeah, let me find that real quick. Was that one of the images?
No, they basically just plugged in like a bunch of tax law, and then also, let's say, like the W-2s, just like some made up W-2s, and then it kind of interpreted the tax law, and then found out like how much they were going to get as a refund, something like that.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that's a really interesting use case now, because the using like ChatGPT, for example, it has limitations as far as what all you can give it. So that's a great example of like, if you're a company that's, using this for accounting purposes, or you're just a normal, like you're just a person that's trying to file their taxes, and you don't want to pay for a tax accountant or whatever. You could theoretically just paste in like a massive amount of tax directions, and then use it to ask questions about that. It can analyze it all for you. It can give you suggestions over your personal taxes, and use all that data that you gave it as a reference. So like, the more these models progress, and the more or the larger amounts of data that it can ingest at once, the more and more powerful it's going to be. Another thing I wanted to show too, which I will share my screen here. Get this pulled up. All right, can you see it?
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, it's
So this, one of the main points I wanted to highlight too with GPT-4 was, when you're just having like standard conversations with it, it's probably not that much of a noticeable difference between the previous version. Where it really excels, I guess, is the performance on like more complex tasks. On complex tasks. So it's meant to be a lot more reliable and creative, and it can like handle very nuanced instructions. And so one of the performance indicators that they kind of use within their testing is using their models on all publicly available tests. So that includes like AP exams, LSAT, the bar exam, so on. And so in this visualization here, the blue bars is the test performance for GPT 3.5, which was the previous version, which on a lot of the tests, it still performed very well. But you can see, the very significant improvement across the board on GPT-4 with all of these tests.
do you want to? I can't really see. Do you want to kind of highlight the ones where the jumps are the biggest?
Yeah, sure. So let's see. Take the LSAT, for example. The score looks like it more than doubled. On the bar exam, that's this one right here. Can you see my mouse?
Yeah,
So GPT 3.5 looks like it scored in about like the 10th percentile. And then GPT-4 tested in what looks like the 90th percentile. So
yeah,
9x
and then
improvement on that.
the tests on the right side where the jumps aren't as big, like, are those maybe less complex tests?
I think so. These seem to be AP exams. So like on the far right, you had AP Environmental Science. This one looks like the SAT, AP Art History. So maybe those
So like
are,
a little more standardized, I would imagine.
yeah, I think so. And one of the things they kind of mentioned here is that they're like in the data that they use to train these models, some of like the testing questions, for example, are included in that data, but they said it's like a very minor amount. And so they still feel that the results are very representative of the performance improvements. So,
Cool.
and two, this one is also pretty interesting. On the far left, you have AP calculus, so like very complex math problems. GPT 3.5, the score is non-existent, so I assume it like basically got none of the answers correct. Whereas GPT-4 tested in like the 45th percentile roughly. So it's getting way better at doing math as well, which I find this interesting, and I don't quite understand how it works. Because in their product demo, they said that GPT doesn't have like a calculator hooked up to it in the backend. All that it's doing is taking the data that it's given and predicting what the next words are going to be. And so when it comes to math, like how does that work? I don't understand.
Yeah, I was also going to make that point with it being multimodal and now being able to interpret images. I don't see how that's the same thing as predicting the next set of words. Um, yeah. Do you have any
I'm
thoughts
not
on
sure
that?
either,
Like,
actually. Uh, no, I'm not sure as far as like how that works. I wonder if it's just been trained on. Yeah, actually, I'm not even going to speculate because I don't entirely know.
mm,
But with math in particular, it's really interesting to see the massive improvement that it has. Because a lot of math, especially like AP calculus, and this is AP calculus BC, which I think is the highest level of calculus testing that you can do. It's not just a matter of like plugging things into a calculator. It requires like a very high level of reasoning. So it's not just like, it's no longer just good at writing things. It can actually, like it's getting, I would say, more intelligent. Like
it's generally, it's like maybe it's approaching that AGI type of thing.
right. And, I think like the definition of AGI is, it's like a semantic thing. Like it's hard to really, like there's lots of different definitions, but when we look at something like this, when it comes, and on this testing metric alone, which is like all the publicly available tests, it's smarter than a human. You aren't going to find a human that can test in these percentiles on every single test that's available.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. It's far more general than I am in
Yeah,
its intelligence. So,
exactly. Yeah. And not only is it like passing these tests, it's doing so in like the 80th to 90th plus percentile. Some tests even up in the like the top 1 to 2% of testers. So performing
and
extremely well.
yeah, no doubt. What are those tests where it doesn't do well? This like three from the left or whatever.
Um, so this one is Code Forces rating. Don't know what that is. This one's interesting. AP English Literature. And then the other one is AMC 10. I don't know what that is either. But
Wow, the AP literature. That's really interesting. You figure that would be
yeah,
out of the park.
yeah. Oh, that is interesting. And then let's see. I think there were some other visualizations here I wanted to show. Oh yeah, the multimodal aspect of it. I'll go through some of these examples really quickly, but this one I thought in particular was really interesting. So it's just a image or a set. It's one single image that contains multiple different images, and the user asks, so what's funny about this image and describe it panel by panel. And so panel 1 is just a smartphone with a VGA connector. It describes that. And then panel 2, the package for the lightning cable adapter with a picture of a VGA connector on it. And then the panel 3 is a close-up of the VGA connector with the lightning connector, which is just like an iPhone charger at the end of it. And then it says the humor in this image comes from the absurdity of plugging a large, outdated VGA connector into a small, modern smartphone charging port. And at first glance, like for us at least, like this is easy to interpret and um, it doesn't seem like a very impressive task. But if you really think about it, like when you're asking a computer that does not know emotion, that does not have a consciousness, you're asking it, what is funny about this image? Something that like asking it to understand humor, that's like a very high level, trying to think of how I want to describe this. Like
It
humor is very abstract. It's not like can't just use text to interpret what is funny about this. It's like a very high level of reasoning that that like shows it has a level of understanding of emotion in a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it also reveals that it has a deep understanding of us, um, because it perfectly articulates what we found funny about it.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Mm. Yeah.
So I
We
was
were talking. Well, we were just talking before we started recording. There's some correlation between humor and intelligence, and like to have humor is a sign that you're really intelligent. Um, I think is something along the lines of that. So yeah, this is just a really impressive feat here.
yeah, I agree for sure. I think that was kind of blown over in the product announcement. Like being able to understand something that's as abstract as humor, like having a computer able to interpret that, like that's mind blowing in my opinion. Um, did you watch the demo by the way? I think you did, right?
Yeah,
What did you think about it? Did you like that was the first like presentation I've ever seen from them, so I thought it was pretty cool.
yeah, yeah. I liked it.
Uh, the one example in particular I thought was really cool from that was where they like sketched out a website, like an outline of a website on a piece of paper, like a very rough sketch, and then took a picture of it and sent it to GPT-4 and said, "Write me the code for this website." And so it scanned the image, knew it interpreted what the boundaries were for the website that it based on the sketch, and then wrote the code for it on the first try. Again, mind blowing.
Yeah. Earlier I said the tax document was the thing that struck me the most, but now that I'm thinking about it, that's by far the coolest. It's almost the most impressive, and it's like just for me personally, that's just it would be incredibly helpful because I know nothing about coding. Um,
Right.
I know nothing about creating a website, and just to be able to do that in 2 seconds, that would be insane.
Yeah. Or even like if you're building a website and doing it in pieces, I guess, as someone who doesn't really know how to code, you can like take a bunch of different screenshots of different websites that you like or examples that you like and say, I want it to look like this, write me the code for it, and then you upload that image. And then as you continue to have a conversation with this or with the chat bot, it's basically like adapting your website code in real time based on whatever specifications that you give it. So it's like it's like sitting down with a professional web designer that can build whatever you want, but except it can write the code instantaneously and you can just show it images and like it can completely understand
Mm,
it. Like,
really basic images too. I mean, the sketch was
Mhm.
nothing fancy.
Yeah. I guess the next big thing was Google. Earlier this week, they announced that they had integrated um, basically generative AI into their entire suite of products. So, like Google Docs, presentations, I think Google Meetings as well. Basically, everything. They have now integrated AI into it. I think this is probably the first, like, I think it is the first true, like, consumer related AI application that Google has put out. And I remember you saying that this was something that you'd actually be able to use a lot. So what were your thoughts on that?
I was just really excited about it. Seems like there's a lot of just really useful aspects to it that are gonna like cut down on the time it takes to kind of do the just mundane kind of office stuff that comes in. at least with my life
Mhm.
as a student and whatever the heck else I do. So I can kind of go over briefly what it does, what I saw. Um,
Yeah, sure.
okay, so it looks like it can summarize email chains. Um, it can create responses to emails. It can create briefs based on email conversations. Uh, and then you can turn those into presentations, into PowerPoints, and easily customize those from there. It can capture meeting notes. So if you just, I guess if you just kind of like record we're recording this, it can separately take notes on that. And it can just like write personalized messages for clients. So that's kind of what they showed in the demo. And yeah, I loved all of it. I was a big fan.
The first thing that kind of clicked in my mind when I saw this was like 1,000 startups just died overnight because before any of these major companies had started to integrate AI into their products, there were all of these different startups that were designed for like these more specific use cases. So you had like startups popping up for like being your email writing assistant, startups popping up for like AI generated presentations, startups for meeting notes. So like I saw full blown platforms launch that had raised millions of dollars that were just like the same thing as like Zoom. Like they built their own version of that and then had AI running in the back end that would like automatically transcribe your meetings, automatically write notes for you on the meetings, give summary points and stuff like that. Um, but then when you have all of these companies like Google and Microsoft just go ahead and integrate it into their own products, like all these startups are basically rendered useless overnight because at the end of the day, like if you're an entrepreneur and you're building something that is kind of like, I guess, a feature of what larger platforms could be doing, you kind of have to assume that over time they're going to integrate AI into their platforms either way. So it's kind of like a waste of time to just try to build out a whole separate platform for that.
Yeah,
I guess that's kind of just like my business perspective on it.
right. And I wonder too, how these releases affect like this kind of battle between small business and these big corporations. Cause I think up to now we thought of AI as something that really helps out the little guy. But, now it's kind of the point where like, I don't know. I think with these releases, I don't specifically know why, but it kind of seems to level the playing field. Like, oh, we can all sort through our work now faster uh, uh, and kind of cut down on the small things. So
Yeah. No, I think it's a good thing. It's just not a smart business strategy in general to build startups in that way. So like I'm not
mm,
like it was kind of it was inevitable for Google and Microsoft and these big companies to integrate it into their platform. And I think for like you said for the consumers, like this is amazing because it's now like the platforms that people are already used to using every single day, like Google, their set of products, like majority of businesses are using Google's suite of products or Microsoft's for like their business applications. So now when AI is just automatically being integrated into that, you're automatically having all of these companies now onboarded into AI and using it and making them way more efficient. And so, yeah, it really just like allows normal everyday people that aren't like super tech savvy the ability to utilize these technologies and like just become way more efficient in all aspects of their lives. So yeah, I
yeah,
think that's probably one of the main things here.
yeah,
Um,
they're kind of just an example I can recall of where this would be incredible was just during I did an internship with just a county prosecutor's office. And so all day
mhm.
those people are just grinding through emails and reading reports and drafting documents. Oh my gosh. And that particular office was swamped just because of the crime situation they were facing. And I mean, hopefully they're onto this because I know they're all underpaid and they work way too much,
Yeah.
and they're just too much work. And so yeah, I think this would just be incredible for them.
Oh, I agree. And I kind of wonder what the implications of this are for like how we ingest content in general. Like, well, it could almost become the norm to have AI just like take anything that long form content and summarize it into a couple sentences. Like, are people actually going to read long articles anymore? Or are they just gonna like use the tool that's already integrated into their web browser to just summarize the article into a couple different points and then read it? And instead of spending, 20 minutes reading that article, they spent 30 seconds just reading the bullet points of what it goes over. And I guess the same could be said for like emails. Like, are people actually going to read emails anymore? Or are they just going to have their AI assistant like just say, this is what the email says. How would you like to respond? And you give it like a one sentence response, and then it automatically types stuff out for you. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it
That's
it's probably
kind
going
of
to be
interesting to think about.
right, and it's probably going to be good and bad, and it probably just depends on how you use it personally. Like, you're gonna have to be careful about which emails you just kind of breeze over and get the main points from, and then you have to select carefully. Like, oh wait, this is an important email. I gotta really look to see what's here. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's kind of my thought with it with school too. As an English major, I just get like tons of reading, and honestly, even when I read an article, really all I get from an article will be like 2 points. I'll just kind of remember like, oh, it's generally about this, and this is what I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
If I can just get that in a summary that takes 2 seconds, yeah, that's probably gonna be what I'll do. But when it comes to things that I'm really interested in or whatever else, like there's value in that nuance that comes with like long form articles, and so yeah, you're just gonna have to kind of pick and choose.
Yeah. Probably a little bit of both. And I don't think it's a bad thing by any means. Like, the more efficient that humans can be in general, I think is obviously for the better. Um, but it's just kind of funny to think how much our normal everyday work lives are at the beginning stages is starting to change rapidly.
Yeah, and I feel confident about this prediction. I think Apple, I'm gonna put like $20 on this. Apple either is or needs to integrate this AI into their text messaging. Because like my family, dude, I love them. I have like 20 group chats going on. I can't possibly keep up with it all. So it would be so nice if I just kind of had the same thing for texting, which is like, just
Yeah.
send it out, text like no other. So,
Yeah. I agree. That's funny. And that actually reminds me of something else. Texting on iPhones, or I guess all smartphones have it, but you know how like when you're typing in, it kind of has like a next word predictor at the top of the
mhm.
keyboard. That's literally what large language models are doing, just predicting the next word, right?
Yeah,
So like, think about how inefficient it is typing on a keyboard, letter by letter. Like, I would love to see. Like, I wonder if there's anyone working on like an LLM keyboard that's like, you know what I mean? Like, it uses, like, you could use ChatGPT as an example. Um, as you type, it's like interpreting not only what you're typing, but also conversation history as well. And then uses the next word predictor to kind of like give you suggestions on what to write right on your phone. And so instead of typing in letter by letter, you're just picking the words one at a time. And like, I feel like that would just speed up typing so much, like,
yeah,
especially for slower typers.
yeah. I
So
don't know.
I feel like that Apple needs to kind of step up their game here with AI. Like, they've been silent. They haven't really done anything. And I'm really curious to see like what they're working on, or if they're gonna put anything out and enter this space at all.
Mhm. They have to. They they have to. But at this rate that we've seen this past week, they'll probably drop something tomorrow.
Right. I feel like they definitely are. It's just I'm curious to see what it'll end up being, because I think at this point, like out of all of the major tech companies, Apple's probably been the most silent on AI in general,
Mhm.
at least that I can think of. So,
Because
yeah,
too, I
we'll
mean, they're
see.
gonna have to incorporate this into like pages and Excel, or not Excel, but numbers, and I think that's what it's
Mhm.
called. Yeah, numbers.
Yeah,
I mean, they got a lot of work to do. So, yeah,
they
it's not
do.
only just with the iPhone, but with the MacBook as well. So,
Yeah, for sure. I guess that kind of leads us into Microsoft's latest announcement, which was they launched 365 Copilot, which Microsoft 365, I'm pretty sure that's just like a suite of products similar to what Google does. Like they have their own versions of docs and sheets and stuff like that. Um, Microsoft Teams, I believe, is what they use for meetings. So basically the same launch as Google, just Microsoft's version of it. Um, do you have any notes on that or any big takeaways from it? I mean, it's basically the same announcement as Google.
yeah, I didn't actually dive into it at all, but I do find it interesting. So, Microsoft 365 is what we use for school,
Oh,
and
really? Okay.
it's so far my classes, my professors have come out as super against AI. But if this stuff is getting integrated into Microsoft 365, this is going to be funny because we're all going to be using it anyway. So, uh, but no,
That is
other than
funny,
that,
yeah.
I really haven't looked at it.
What is, what, if you don't mind talking about it, like, how are they kind of, how are teachers kind of responding to AI? Like, are they just saying, like, don't use it for writing or you'll get a zero? Like, what are they saying, really?
Um, their stance, and granted, I'm an English major, so I mean, I think their stance is fair. They don't want you relying on it because they want you to like develop your own voice and really learn for yourself how to write, which I get. And that's pretty much the gist of it. Now, I think it goes beyond that. Like, I think they almost have like a dislike of AI, and whatnot. But yeah, that's kind of the basis of it.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's kind of what I would have guessed. Yeah, so my 365 Copilot is integrated into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, and Teams. So again, basically like the same announcement that came from Google pretty much. But what I kind of found the most interesting about that was just the timing of it. Like I wonder if if Microsoft didn't anticipate on putting that out this week, but the fact that they saw Google launch on Tuesday or whatever it was, and then they were like, okay, let's put this out now as like a response. Like it was literally like a day later, maybe 2 days. So yeah, the battle is just heating up between Google and
Yeah,
Microsoft. It's awesome to see.
yeah, yeah. It is, and um, but this is. I mean, I came to this conclusion from kind of diving into a separate thing, but I just kind of came to the idea that I think in an ideal world, like in regards to AI alignment, you would have kind of clear communication, honest communication between all these different AI companies. But in reality, what's m- more likely to happen and to be the benefit in reality, really our only chance at having like some sort of healthy AI environment is just to have healthy competition. Um,
Mhm.
you know, and that's exactly what we're seeing right now. So yeah, I'm all for it.
I agree. Yeah, 100%. And that kind of ties into one of the other topics that we wanted to touch on a bit was that Verge article that I sent you about one of the co-founders of OpenAI, their chief scientist, I believe. He had. Uh, there's been a lot of discussion recently, and we actually did a whole episode on this about just like whether or not AI should be open source or not. Um, and the quote from this guy, so this article snippet says, when asked why OpenAI changed its approach to sharing its research, Sutskever, I'm pronouncing that wrong, but he's the chief scientist at OpenAI. He said, "We were wrong, flat out wrong. If you believe, as we do, that at some point AI and AGI is going to be extremely, unbelievably potent, then it just does not make sense to open source. It's a bad idea. I fully expect that in a few years it's going to become completely obvious to everyone that open sourcing AI is just not wise. And that's kind of the stance that I have. I think, we kind of went back and forth a little bit on this on one of our previous episodes, but what were your thoughts on them actually kind of coming out and saying that publicly?
Um, I guess on at a certain level, I don't understand why he's so certain that open source is bad or the wrong move. Like, I mean, I think you can certainly make the argument for it, but he seems certain. He's like passionate about his stance. So I want to know kind of what his thoughts are there. Um,
Yeah.
um, can you explain?
Um, that the quote was kind of limiting. And I think a lot of it is just like, I think a lot of the reasoning behind that is just you don't, it's a very dangerous thing to develop these extremely advanced technologies where you have like OpenAI, for example, has a team of like the best AI people in the industry all working together. And then just imagine that all that code and everything, all the parameters that they're using is then open sourced, and you're enabling anyone access to that to use it for whatever kind of abilities they might want to. There's a lot that will go wrong with that, 100%. And I think the argument that he's kind of making is when we're talking about AGI specifically, just kind of relinquishing that ability, I guess, to the whole world to see publicly and for people to manipulate in ways that they would want to. It's just that would do a lot more harm than it would to just keep everything closed and have the free market play out. Let these companies just let competition do its work.
Yeah,
That's at least my interpretation of it.
no. So I think what he's doing is he's saying that the dangers of having sentient AI aren't as dangerous as AI getting in the wrong hands, like whatever that may look like. And he thinks that, yeah, like you said, the market can kind of take care of the sentient AI problem, while also when it's closed source, you can take care of the AI being in the wrong hands problem. So yeah, okay, I'm on board with that. Yeah, just initially I was kind of taken aback by his um how sure he was, because I felt
Yeah,
I don't feel like we had come to that conclusion with our last episode. So, but no, that's good.
yeah. And that did you see that Sam Altman is going on the Lex Friedman podcast next week?
Yeah, yeah, that'll be
Yeah,
cool.
that I'm really excited for that because I guarantee Lex is going to ask about these topics, like, regarding open sourcing things and the logic behind that, and just kind of the strategy in general that OpenAI is using for alignment and like the development of their models. So super interested to watch that because I feel like we'll get a lot of more nuanced detail that we haven't really had up to this point. Like a lot of the OpenAI, like while they do put out a lot of research for everyone to see, a lot of the topics that we've kind of been discussing on the podcast and stuff, they haven't really commented on it all that much. So um, yeah, super excited for that. And I'm sure once we get to see that, we'll have a lot more to talk about on our next podcast episode.
Yeah, and as a Lex fan, it'll be interesting to hear his thoughts on AI, because I mean that's kind of the whole point of this podcast, but he doesn't really talk about it much. I mean, I think he's had like episodes on it, but I just haven't checked those out. So yeah, it'll be good to hear that.
Yeah, for sure. And then our last episode, we kind of talked about Eliezer, right, and his doomsday scenario for AI. And then one of the topics that I think you said you had some notes on was this other guy. What's his name? Robin Hanson.
Yeah,
I guess he has a very opposing view, right?
Yeah, and I think he's kind of been in a long time debate with is it Eliezer or Eliezer? I don't remember. I thought it was
I don't.
Eliezer.
I don't know. Uh, Let's go with Eliezer.
Okay. Yeah, so um yeah, I guess they've been in debate over this topic for quite a while, and basically just in the podcast. I read the transcript, but in the podcast, Hansen just kind of goes over his counter arguments to Eliezer. And yeah, he just takes so if you remember Eliezer, as Alex said, kind of has the doomsday opinion that AI is going to destroy us. Hansen thinks there's less than 1% chance that that will happen. And he kind of breaks down his reasoning for that. Um, and so, mm, okay, so not same goals. So Eliezer is concerned with AI having the same goals as us, but Hansen's rebuttal to that is kind of, a lot of the AI that we're seeing at the moment can only do specific tasks, and they're not concerned um, with their future, which I think is kind of self evident. And I have a note that says Eliezer's rebuttal to that would be that the intelligence necessary for performing these specific tasks is capable of developing these goals on its own. And I think I agree with Eliezer there. Hansen doesn't seem to like, I don't want to say respect. I don't want to say, because it's not that he's being disrespectful of AI, but it's like he's not comprehending that a side effect of all this intelligence is kind of like potentially consciousness, which is a point that I brought up a couple episodes ago. Brett Weinstein, the evolutionary biologist, brought it up. We don't really know what produces consciousness, and it seems that a lot of the same things that consist that our brain consists of as humans, it can also be found in these AI systems, and it's possible, not likely, but it's possible that within that AI system, something like consciousness appears. And so that's just something that Hansen doesn't really grapple with very well in my eyes.
So real quick, is what is the point that Hansen's kind of trying to make is that intelligence alone doesn't imply that you would have goals. Like, is he basically saying like they don't have to, like they don't come together. Like AI can be extremely intelligent while at the same time it just doesn't. It's indifferent to things. Is that what you're saying,
Well,
or
he's
what
just
he's saying?
saying. So if you remember, Eliezer talked about like the worry is that if we create something and tell it if we create something to like say replicate a strawberry, like an image of a strawberry, the intelligence necessary for that replication has the strength to like create consciousness. That's more or less what's happening there. And I just think Hansen is saying um, it doesn't extend beyond just creating that strawberry.
I see.
Does that answer your question?
I think so. I'm not sure where I lie on that, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so, but then I think Hansen makes a good point. So he says, if AI does develop goals, we might still be able to coexist with it. Um, he says just because something is a super intelligence doesn't make it God. He doesn't say that, but that's kind of a good example. Like, he provides the example of Walmart. Walmart uh, has an incredible amount of intelligence within it as an organization, just based off the amount of employees, the technology it has, and whatever else is going on. It is a super intelligence. Yeah, it doesn't have the capability to just like take over the world to become the world's richest entity. It comes in contact with natural forces that oppose it, and it kind of just it doesn't necessarily stay still, but it experiences slow growth, and he thinks that will kind of be what AI is like. He's not saying it won't get to the point where it's just like crazy powerful, but it won't be quick to a point where we can't
I
react to it.
see.
And got one more point. He does mention that kind of, which is something we also talked about before we recorded. He just mentions that, right now talking about these scenarios is not useless, but just very hard because we don't really understand what these technologies are going to look like that are capable of developing this much power, this much intelligence, and whatnot. So, I think you can look into these arguments as much as you want. It's interesting. There's probably some value in it, but at the end of the day, they're really abstract. And, until these problems start presenting themselves, it's not really clear what we're going to be facing here. So that's where I kind of drew the two conclusions. Like, all right, so really what we need to be focusing on is just creating a really healthy environment um, of competition within AI. And then you just need as many competent um, people as you can get within the field. I don't know how you can do that, but I'm assuming, a lot of our great thinkers are headed in that direction. And yeah, I think that's kind of the only
Yeah.
thing we can do.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think that's like kind of happening organically, right? Like,
Mhm.
I think anyone that is remotely knowledgeable on just what's happening in the AI world, like it's very clear that this is where we're headed. Like this is kind of like our, at least what I'm presuming to be kind of like our form of an industrial revolution. Like AI is going to vastly change our entire technological landscape, the way that we operate, and just our day-to-day lives and the way we work. Um, and so, yeah, I think right now the way things are working is, we're on the right path as far as just competition goes. Because there's a lot of really cool stuff happening in the space, and it's not really. I mean, we do have like kind of OpenAI slash Microsoft leading the helm by quite a bit, but I do think we're still very, very early innings, and like there's so much room for other companies and competition to come in and kind of make the landscape or the competitive landscape a lot more intense. So the only thing that I don't really, I think Eliezer, like the main bone I have to pick with him is just like the way he talks about it, like it's a 100% certainty. Like there's just no other way around this. Like I kind of find it a bit arrogant in a way to just be like tact to be able to say with that much confidence that this is the only path and the only way that anything else could happen is if you're just flat out wrong. Like I don't I personally don't like to speak in like that big of certainties when it comes to things, and so I kind of feel like with him it just um he took it a bit too far in the sense that like this is what's going to happen. There's no way around it. We're all going to die. It's like, okay, well,
Yeah, and I mean, within his own argument, he's hypocritical because he says, on the one hand, you can't predict what AI is going to do, and then on the other hand, he predicts what AI is going to do. And
right.
and I think generally your grievance with Eliezer is Hanson's, and I didn't really get into this, but one reason why healthy competition is so important that Hanson highlights is because if you develop multiple, let's just call them AGIs. And if you develop multiple AGIs, it's still guaranteed that they will have aligned goals. So you can use that as leverage to align yourself with whichever AGI it is, and kind of secure your position there. Um, so yeah, I think Eliezer brings up good points. I think he's overall, like I said, maybe a little touch arrogant, wrong. And I think Hanson brings up some points that I think are wrong, but he also brings up some good stuff. So again, interesting. Is it worth putting your money on either one of them? Probably.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Uh, uh, is there any other like broad topics that you wanted to go over? Let's check what I've got here. If there's nothing else that we have, I can. There's a couple of like cool examples that I saw of just stuff people posted on Twitter of what GPT-4 has been able to do so far. Uh, One main example that I saw, which I thought was really impressive, was um, someone asked GPT-4 to build an iPhone app that recommends 5 new movies every single day and also have trailers on them and include information on where to watch it. Um, that's one of the main things I've noticed about a vast difference in improvement from GPT 3.5 to 4 is just the reliability, particularly when it comes to coding. Um, I've used 3.5 for coding purposes before, and it was not super reliable. And a lot of like the engineers that I talked to found that to be the same. Still extremely helpful, but without having that really good backbone knowledge of how to code, you were probably going to reach a dead end at some point just because there were going to be issues that were wrong with the code, and 3.5 wasn't really adept enough to figure that out. Um, but even like in the example that OpenAI gave in their live stream demo, they had it build a Discord bot, and it produced the code pretty much instantaneously. They ran the code, and there was like a couple different errors, and then all they had to do was just paste those errors into ChatGPT, and they didn't even have to say fix it. All they did was just paste in those errors, and then it immediately understood, oh, okay, these are the error codes that you got in response. I can now look back on the code that I had already made, see what I got wrong, fix it, rewrite it, and then give you the updated code. And then they just copied and pasted the updated code, and boom, it worked. So like theoretically, if you have no coding knowledge whatsoever, you can build, like we're reaching an era where you can build apps, you can build websites, anything that you want in a conversational way without having any coding knowledge whatsoever. And anything that you don't know how to do, you just ask it right there and it will tell you how to do it. Like the implications of this are just insane.
Yeah. Kind of without maybe going into the details of your business, like, could you talk about, I know you said you were going to start incorporating ChatGPT 4 into what you guys are doing. Like, is there anything you could talk about what those are, what those things are, how it's going?
Um, so one of the projects that I'm kind of working on is related to like financial data, for example. So like the public stock markets and everything. Um, the issues that I have found with previous models were like, even with the ChatGPT model, which is 3.5, it was just very bad at interpreting like very structured data. So, for example, had if you had like an income statement from a public company and you wanted to just like copy and paste that into ChatGPT, it would just not be able to interpret it that well, very poorly actually, because a lot of this data is like within tables. It's not just like plain text, lots of numbers over lots of different time periods. So it's extremely complex for, at least for an AI to figure out. And so far from what I've seen with GPT-4, it's like significantly better at interpreting just very complex and structured data, especially when a lot of it is just numbers. So again, kind of going back to like the chart that we showed earlier about just the difference and improvement when it comes to like complex reasoning. Uh, at least within my testing as well, that's very prevalent. Like it's extremely better, not only at just math, but being able to break things down that aren't quite very easy to solve, I guess. It can break it down into multiple different steps automatically and really like walk through the the logic or the reasoning that it's going through. Um, so yeah, it's been super cool to see all these different examples. I think I had a couple others here. Let's see. Here we go. So someone had it recreate the game of Pong and within 60 seconds. So
Dang.
This person had never built a game before, and they just hopped on ChatGPT, and boom, they got it done within a minute. Worked on the
That,
first try.
that's hilarious. I wonder how long it took for the original developers of Pong
Oh,
to do it.
that's funny to think about. Yeah. Um, Someone used it for drug discovery. So let's see. It said, give it a currently available drug, and then it can find compounds with similar properties, modify them to make sure they're not patented, and then purchase them from a supplier, even including sending an email with a purchase order. That's like, again, high level reasoning there that is required to do something like that. But yeah, day by day, we're seeing just like dozens of examples come out of how advanced this really is getting. And it's exciting times for sure. I tweeted something out the other day that this is like, in my opinion, the most exciting time to be alive, probably in history. Like I think we won't even be able to really begin to comprehend how all this stuff is going to change all of our lives. So I guess that's kind of the point of this podcast, right? We get to document that along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's exciting.
Well, should we wrap it up there then?
Yeah, I think that's a good spot.
All right, cool. Thanks everybody for watching, and then we will be back next week.